going to need some help with this one. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and today I'm going to talk about how to get your ideas accepted in a wider community, especially a bureaucratic community. And the trick is that you are going to need 3 editors. And why is that? Well, I argue that you're going to need all of that editorial help because of something that I call the writer's eye. You know, a writer tends not to see the gaps in their own writing because in their mind, they know what is supposed to be on the page, and their brain just fills in those gaps. As a result, what's on the paper makes sense to them, but it doesn't necessarily make any sense to anybody else. I don't know what the technical name for that phenomenon is. I mean, I'm sure there is one, and if you know what it is, leave a comment and I'll pin you to the top of the comments. But anyways, because of this phenomenon, you're going to need someone to act as an editor. And in fact, you're going to need 3 editors. You need people to be looking at what you've written to make sure that there are no gaps and that it actually makes sense. Now, the good news here is that even though people hate to write, they love to edit. And that can be an incredibly valuable tool, both to get the ball rolling and to get it across the goal line. You see, the real reason that you need editors is to take advantage of the fact that people love to edit. They love to find and point out mistakes that other people have made. So don't bother asking people to be writers. Don't send them a blank sheet of paper and ask them a question. Send them something to edit. You want to see proof of this? Go on any online forum, pose a problem, and then ask people to provide a solution. And you know what you're going to get? Crickets. And now, log in under a different account name and go back to that original post and provide some lengthy solution that's half-baked or, heck, completely wrong. And then watch the feedback come flying in. People hate to write, but they love to edit. And so, if you're going to write effectively, of course, you're going to need editors. And I argue that you're going to need 3 editors. But why 3? Well, a lot of people think, when I'm done writing this, I'll just hand it off to somebody to polish up. But I gotta warn you, that is not going to work. It's tied up with this thing about 3 editors, because in reality, what you need are 3 different types of editors throughout the process. To understand where I'm going with this, let me make the argument that every document has 3, attributes. You've got content, structure, and style. Content is what you put into the document, structure is how you organize that, and then style is how you go about writing it. My personal observation is that it's difficult to edit all 3 of those attributes at the same time. I mean, if somebody asks you to edit a document that has lousy content, incoherent structure, and poor style, that is going to be some tough editing. But it is much easier to edit a document that has at least 1, hopefully 2 of these attributes squared away. For example, if the content and the style are good, but the structure doesn't make any sense, well, that's pretty easy to edit. Oh, and by the way, one of the reasons that people hate to write is because it is virtually impossible to get all 3 of these attributes, content, structure, and style, right in a single go. But once something's on paper, it is easier to edit out the problems. Anyway, back to why you need 3 editors. You're going to want different editors to help you as the document evolves through time. Early on, you'll need help getting the content and the structure hammered out. Then, once you have about the 80% solution, you're going to need somebody who can come in with a fresh set of eyes. Then, you're going to want somebody to come in at the very end of the process, typically to focus on issues of style. You see, one of the challenges that's going to crop up with each and every one of these editors is that they themselves will develop that writer's eye, that inability to see gaps in their own writing or the things that they've edited. So you have that first type of editor, the one who comes in and provides content and structure, but over time they start to focus on the contributions that they've provided, and they lose some of their initial objectivity. They gradually lose their ability to tell whether or not the document actually says what they think it says. That's why that second group of people is so important. They show up later in the process once most of the content and the structure has been put into the document. They're able to identify where there are gaps, and even though eventually they'll get their own version of writer's eye, they do a lot to get the final document ready. And so the work of the first and the second editors, they should set conditions so that by the time that the third editor comes in, there's no actual gaps in the document. As a result, that third editor can focus on issues of style, punctuation, and grammar without getting tripped up by content that doesn't make sense. So the uncomfortable reality is that you need all 3 of these editorial groups as you move through the process. Once you have them, writing your document turns into a pretty straightforward event. You get something written down and you kick it to your first editorial group. Just send them something to edit. Don't worry about making it a 100% product. In fact, if you put too much heart and soul into that first draft, well, then when the editors tear it apart, it kind of hurts your ego. So aim for a partial solution. You just get it on paper, you send it to them, and let them go to work. Then you take their feedback, you incorporate it, and repeat that a couple of times. Once the product is far enough along, you give it to your second editorial group, and then your third. Believe it or not, this is much faster, and you can produce a much higher quality product than you could if you tried to do it all by yourself. And it'll be much better quality than any one of those editors could have produced. Remember, people hate to write, but they love to edit, so you just got to use that to your advantage. Now, what if you don't have 3 editors? What if you're kind of stuck going it alone? Let me share a suggestion from an old college professor. He said, put your writing in the freezer. And he was being 100% literal. He meant put your writing somewhere out of the way where you're not going to think about it. He literally put it into his freezer. And then after some time has passed, pull it out and read it with a fresh set of eyes. Mitigate that writer's eye by looking at your own writing as if you're editing somebody else's. It can give you great clarity. Now, for government writing, this technique does come with one important caveat, and that is you're going to need time to let the document sit. If you don't have people to help you with the editing process, then you're going to need to get started early so that you have time to write, go away, and then come back. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I've actually been using these techniques with you for quite some time. Often, I do preliminary research on some kind of topic, for example, the Major Richard Starr Act. I post an initial video based off of what I've learned, and then those of you with deeper and more nuanced understanding, well, you start to fill in the gaps. And then I'm able to produce a much more sophisticated version. And I gotta be honest, I kind of enjoy the process.